Phils are back tonight. Aaron Nola gets the ball. It is a Nola day. The Nola days haven't been all that great there. Frank Klose, who joins us for his weekly mailbag, he is back. You can get your mailbag questions in each and every week for Frank. Frank had a lot of mailbag questions thrown his way this week. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that people are believing in this team, Frank? Are people intrigued and interested by this Phillies team 2 games over 500?
Well, Mike, one thing that you'll notice there was a difference than a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago when we got a lot of questions, it was like, okay, who can they trade to get prospects? This is kind of the opposite. It looks like Phillies fans want the Phillies to add, which means that they're excited about this team. You know, as we talk right now, 2.5 games behind the New York Mets. Certainly they're within reach. Lots of games left in the National League East. So the Phillies can take care of business, especially with the Mets. Unfortunately, they lose their ace in Jake DeGrom and lose their $300 million new shortstop in Frankie Lindor to significant injuries in significant time. So I think fans can smell that the NL East can be had.
Yeah, it feels like it's there for the taking. This thing is up for grabs, as you mentioned, 2.5 games behind the Mets as they take on the Yankees tonight. The Phillies do in a 2-game set. And then really an important stretch of games, Frank. You got Atlanta, who is 2 games behind you, and then you can really bury Washington with 4 games against both Atlanta and Washington before you get to that trade deadline. You can get some separation between you and those 2 teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of those teams have had also devastating injuries. I mean, Ronald Acuna Jr. is one of the most prolific players in this game right now. And for the Braves to lose him and replace him with Jock Peterson, a lifetime .230 hitter, that's a major downgrade for the Braves. So, of course, they've also had issues with Mike Soroka and Max Fried. And so, you know, the Phillies really can take advantage of this situation and, as you said, really put some space here.
We'll get to your mailbag questions in a second. I'm not sure if you heard Dave Dombrowski on with John Clark in the Takeover podcast, but he admitted in that podcast, we are not sellers. Unless something crazy happens over the next 10 days or so, he came right out and said, we are not sellers. So do you anticipate, Frank, some action happening sooner than later?
I do. I think Dave Dombrowski was hired because they expected him to sort of retool the organization and keep the Phillies relevant at the same time. And I think that the Phillies will try to live in both worlds. You know, excuse me, they drafted Andrew Painter a week ago, a young arm that was compared to Mick Abel the previous year's first-round pick. And those guys are going to take a while to go through the Phillies system. So it looks like we're going to see this rebuild going on in the back. But right now he's here to win. And like the Phillies fans, he senses that the NL East is there for the taking. And I think that's the presentation he sort of made to Phillies ownership, that he can try to be competitive now, still make the playoffs, but also at the same time rebuild the organization.
All right, a lot of questions in this week's mailbag. Let's highlight a few. This one's from Jill. She wants to know, what would the Phillies need to acquire by the deadline to get to the postseason, and what are players that are realistic possibilities to do so?
Well, I think the obvious one, of course, would be bullpen, and that always is going to be an issue. You can never have enough bullpen in your your major league roster. The question that often comes up, a bunch of people were asking about Craig Kimbrell. You know, I worry that he might be a little too expensive for the Phillies. Right now, you're looking at a team that's got just over $4 million available under that luxury tax threshold. I don't think the Phillies would cross that for this season. You know, again, one of those seasons where they're hoping to get into the playoffs, but it's really not a slam dunk. I think they would go over the way that they went over for Cliff Lee years ago. But I don't think that this is the type of roster you do that with. So they're working with about $4 million and not a lot to trade. So I don't think Kimbrell's the type, but I think they'll be looking for relievers. A couple names that I came up with are Daniel Bard of the Rockies, Joaquin Soria of the Diamondbacks, some veteran arms that are pretty good and that can help the Phillies along. And really that's what the Phillies have gotten in the past, you know, those types of players. I know that doesn't sound exciting after we saw Brandon Workman and friends last year, but I think they'll be looking for that. I think they'll be looking for a starting pitcher because we saw a week ago with Aaron Nola coming into contact with the positive Alec Boehm. That's set him back 2 starts. And so right now it looks like at any moment the Phillies can bump into the wrong person who has COVID and they're out for a while. So the prospect of the Phillies not having that starter with Vince Velasquez and Matt Moore giving you short starts, that's really concerning. So they probably need somebody who can start for the Phillies. And then the last thing is they seem to be looking for a center fielder. A couple reports had the Phillies linked to Byron Buxton of the Minnesota Twins and Starling Marte of the Miami Marlins. So it looks like the Phillies really want to upgrade that center field position. Odubel Herrera, who's played the most, only batting .241, not getting on base at a great clip either. So it looks like the Phillies want to improve in that their defense in center field and offense in center field as well. So it looks like they're trying to address wherever there might be holes, and I think you might see some action in all three of those categories.
Yeah, Buxton's very interesting. Problem with him has been injuries. He cannot stay on the field, and I believe he is currently still out at the moment. He had a boxer's fracture in his hand. That's a concerning injury for me, for a guy who is supposed to be a power hitter. Marte would be interesting as well. But if you had to pick one or the other, if he could only make one deal, would you add to the offense with one of those two players, both good players, or do you say, go get that reliever?
I would just try to be opportunists, just go after the best opportunity out there. Get better however you can. I mean, I think it's fair to say the bullpen could really use a boost, but it's either Craig Kimbrell or there's really no big name for the bullpen. So if they're not in that Craig Kimbrell conversation, a team like the Giants might have more to trade and more salary room, then you might want to just upgrade wherever you possibly can.
All right, Andrew wants to know, what do the Phillies have in the farm system of value in a trade outside of the untouchables, and who would those untouchables even be?
So I think those untouchables there's two of them really, and that's Mick Gable, last year's first-round draft pick, and Bryson Stott, who was also a first-round draft pick the year before, but somebody who could start for the Phillies in the infield next year. You really need some young talent starting for the Phillies on an everyday basis because you just can't keep paying massive amounts of money for every position. So I think it's really important that they have him ready to start for the Phillies next year somewhere. They'll have to figure out where exactly. And Abel, again, part of that rotation in the future. Now, the Phillies don't have a lot, I will say, beyond that. Not a lot that would intrigue people. I caught up with the AAA team the other day in Trenton. They were playing the Buffalo Bisons, who were hanging out in Trenton for the time being. And just looking down that lineup, you're hard pressed to find somebody hitting over 250 at AAA right now. So they don't really have any type of prospect at AAA that might interest another team. I think the Phillies are going to have to try to trade from the pool of players that might have been promising but haven't been, like the Adam Hasleys and the Mickey Moniaks, and that limits what you're going to get back in return. But some team out there might just give those guys a shot. Would they consider trading Spencer Howard? Maybe. I think probably not, but he's somebody, if they know that they're getting a good enough piece that they can count on for multiple years, maybe they would trade Howard, but they're really hard pressed. You have to go all the way down to Class A to find a lot of their prospects, and I just don't see there being a whole lot out there except for the types of players that other organizations would take a shot on, and that might get you a middle reliever, but it's not going to get you a whole lot. And the Phillies don't have what they've had in the past, which is the financial flexibility to take on a contract. Often teams are looking to add prospects or remove money, and the Phillies can't really help them out in either way in a significant way. So that's something that's concerning there. Rafael Marchand is their number 4 prospect, somebody that the Phillies could use, even this year. Having that third catcher that can come up and down and be helpful to you in the major league roster. But I don't know if they'd want to trade him, but I suppose he could be a trade piece. So in other words, the answer is there's really not a lot.
We know the farm system, yes, has been a little light the last couple of years, trying to rebuild that as well. Phil has an interesting question. Alec Boehm has been out with the COVID. He is back, but do you think Ronald Torreyes will see more time than Alec Boehm?
Yeah, I think Ronald Torreyes has earned some playing time here. Alec Boehm has 11 errors at third base, and it just seems to me that there's something going on where if you have that solid defense, everything feels so much better. I mean, look at Zach Eflin. Zach Eflin has a FIP of 3.68. So the idea of FIP, fielding independent pitching, meaning how would the pitcher do without any worries about the offense? And he's about half a run better. So his ERA right now is about 4.17. He could be in the mid threes if all that would happen is that the defense behind him can make the plays. And I would really try to to see somebody like Eflin, who gets a lot of ground balls and really seems to have been affected greatly by just watching Eflin. It seems like when the defensive miscues happen, he seems to get a little rattled, and then it leads to other issues. So I would like to see Torreyes starting when a guy that throws a lot of ground balls like Zach Eflin is on the mound. And I'd also like to see Ronald Torreyes playing in the late innings when you see that there's a 2-run lead or something like that, and the pitcher on the mound needs to protect that lead. So you need that defensive replacement, in my opinion. And I think Ronald Torreyes has earned that extra playing time. He had the big home run, too, against Nick Pivetta that really helped take home that Red Sox series. So his bat's been good enough. It's been as good as Bohm's, if not better, as of late. So you might as well play him a little bit more. You're trying to win, so you're not worried about people's feelings or the future at this point. If you're trying to win right now, get the best possible defense and lineup on that field.
I mean, could this be a situation, Dave Hollins and Kim Batiste, where you're playing Bohm for 7-8 innings, and the next thing you know, Torreyes is coming in late in games?
I think that's a very wise idea if you have the ability to do so. You can't give away outs right now, especially with the bullpen. Just too many games we've watched where there's a first inning, like even the Didi Gregorius error the other day, right? It just seemed to set the tone for the whole game, right? Because next thing you know, there's a home run, and then boom, the Phillies are down 2-0, and they end up going on to lose that game. So, yeah, I think you really need to make those plays. And again, we've talked about this before. They'll address the structure of this infield on a long-term basis in an offseason. But for right now, they're trying to win. That means you need to play Torreyes a little bit more at third base.
Everybody wants to know, they did scout Cole Hamels, but will they sign Cole Hamels? John is getting credit for that question, but I know that was a very popular one.
Yeah, so there 20 teams out of the
There's
30.
No fan base like a Philly fan base that loves a reunion.
Yeah, 20 teams were there to watch Cole Hamels pitch in Texas. Buster Olney tweeted that he was throwing 88 to 90 miles an hour, of course, in non-game action. That he believed that he would help somebody, and there'd be teams ready to sign him. Todd Zalecki said that one of his reports that the word out of Texas was that he's going to help a major league team. So he's probably signing with somebody. Then the question is who? Now, Buster Olney thinks that he'd be a great...
quick, Frank, Dombrowski said in that podcast that he would not be ready to pitch for at least a month, if not longer.
Right. So whoever signs him, so basically here's what would have to happen. If the Phillies sign Cole Hamels, he probably heads down to Clearwater. He works out on the fields. The Phillies sign him, option him to Clearwater. He might play with the Threshers a little bit, or the rookie team, just to get going. And then he'll do a rehab start probably in August at some point and join a team in September. I mean, you're really looking at a September edition here for whoever signs him. Now, Buster Olney said that the Los Angeles Dodgers might be a team that really could use him because they've had issues with Trevor Bauer that I'm not going to get into, and Clayton Kershaw as well, and they could really use an arm. But I think that's true for every team. So, but the question at the end of the day will be, can the Phillies offer him enough to sign him and beat out the other teams if they determine he's helpful? And
well,
it looks like he's helpful.
You got to imagine that there might be some, nostalgia from him too. No,
I think at this point he wants another World Series ring, and if the Dodgers come calling, they're the defending champs, right? I mean, they could add him. Have plenty of. I mean, they're already like way over the luxury tax. That's not a consideration for them. So what's a few million more? But the Phillies, if they sign him, is that using all their money? Can they offer as much as other teams? Is the situation as appealing? I mean, talking about a team that might squeak into the playoffs is a lot different than somebody who might end up dealing with, a team that's just basically ready to go, right? So, it's going to be a tough one. I don't know if sentimentality alone is going to get a deal done if the Phillies indeed are interested. We haven't heard for sure they've been interested, but we know they were there looking. They were there for Anibal Sanchez earlier this year. He's ended up not signing with anybody, so who knows? You always go to look and see where you can add pitching as much as possible. And in this case, Cole Hamels is somebody who would just cost the money. If they have the money, maybe you give him a shot for that 1 month, 1 month that he could give the Phillies, but we'll see. I think he'll end up somewhere. Are the Phillies the best offer? Are they the best option? I think that's what it's going to come down to in the end.
Frank Klose's Phillies mailbag every Tuesday here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. And a lot going on here, as we mentioned. They got the Yankees tonight, Aaron Nola. Dombrowski was kind of asked about Nola and kind of admitted, he hasn't been great. But what are some of the reasons, and are there anything out there that would suggest that Nola's numbers or his performance isn't matching what's happening here?
Yeah, I don't really know. This has definitely been a down year for Aaron Nola. There's not one thing that kind of jumps out at you. Some have said, well, maybe it could be a dead arm. Maybe, well, he's got this 10-day break now, so maybe that will help him. I don't know, but certainly he could be as good as a starting pitcher addition because he hasn't been giving the Phillies a whole lot as of late, and they could really stand to use the Aaron Nola we saw pitch that complete game against St. Louis. So he's had his moments. I think with a lot of players, even the good ones, they have down years. When you look at their baseball card when the career's over, right? This could be just one of those things, and hopefully he can get it together. And just remember, he's publicly said he just plans not to get vaccinated. He could end up in those protocols at any time if he bumps into the wrong person in the stadium. So that'll be a worry in the back of people's minds going forward as well. But we'll see if he can give them a big start today. That really can help the team feel a lot more confident going down the stretch, and might even help the Phillies make a decision on what they need to add. If they're not confident in Cole Hamels after these next couple starts, maybe they approach the trade deadline a little bit differently.
All right, Frank Klose, of course, the Phillies and Yankees tonight and tomorrow. As we mentioned, this Phillies schedule is very interesting. We told you last week they have the easiest schedule in baseball the rest of the way. They'll play the Yankees for 2, Atlanta for 4, Washington for 4. That'll be the trade deadline. 3 against Pittsburgh, 4 against Washington before they take on the first-place Mets. So where will they be, Frank, by the time they reach the Mets?
I think they'll be in first place.
Bold statement.
Yeah, they'll do fine against the National League East at home. I think they'll do fine in Pittsburgh. By the time you see the Mets are still trying to figure out how to keep their heads above water. We'll see. I think the Phillies could be in first place by then. Whether they can long term, that could depend on what they do by next Friday's deadline.
Frank Klose, at Frank Klose. Get your Phillies mailbag questions in for next week. He had a ton this week, so if we didn't get to yours, we'll try again next week. The Phillies mailbag every Tuesday here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. All right, Frank, take care, pal.
Thanks, Mike.